Good evening, good afternoon, or whatever time that you're watching this broadcast. This is Talking Points. My name is Dr. Stephen E. Gardner, and I'm here to share with you another exciting episode about the words of Jesus. The words of Jesus matter. You know, we live in a time where a lot of people are talking about a lot of different things that matter. Black lives matter. All lives matter. The world matters. But have we considered that the words of Jesus matter? So we want to elevate that topic. We want to elevate our understanding, especially those who ascribe to the Christian faith. The words of Jesus really do matter. This is our fourth part. If you haven't had an opportunity, I would encourage you to go to my website that shows up on the screen here, drstephen.gardner.com. Go back and review part 1, part 2, and part 3 on the words of Jesus matter. So we're going to get right into this today because I really want us, especially those who ascribe to the Christian faith, who are Christ followers or whatever, Christians, whatever you want to call yourself, that ascribe to the teachings of Jesus and the lifestyle that he offers. I want to share with you today 5 mind-boggling truths that Jesus said about discipleship. 5 mind-boggling truths that Jesus said about discipleship. So that's what we're going to talk about today. We're going to be coming from Luke chapter 14, verses 25 through 33. But before we get into today's topic, let's kind of bring things up to date. Let's go back a little bit and let's refresh our minds about some of the things that we've learned in this series. The one thing that stands out in this series is that the words of Jesus are verbal and visual. Jesus intended for his disciples to follow his pattern when making disciples of others. That is, not only use your words, but use your life. Consider the following passages. And the first one is John 13:15. For I have set an example that you should do as I have done to you. Philippians 3:17. Brothers and sisters, join in imitating me and observe those who live according to the example you have in us. And 1 Peter 5:3. Do not lord it over those in your charge, but be an example to the flock. There's an old adage, we've heard it many times, and it's very applicable to what we're talking about in this series. Your actions speak louder than words. Also, what St. Francis of Assisi stated is equally true. Evangelize at all times and sometimes use words. Jesus' actions were also his words. Our actions are also our words. What he modeled before us informed others on how to live. Shouldn't his words and action matter to us? Has his words mattered to the point that we want to live them, not just saving ourselves, but to those who are listening and to those who are watching? 1 Timothy 4:15 and 16 kind of is where the support for that statement is made. The true disciple has moved the words of Jesus beyond memorization and revelation to the ultimate goal of incarnation. So let's get into this, the 5 mind-boggling truths Jesus said about discipleship. Luke 14, verses 25 through 33. Now large crowds were traveling with him, and he turned and said to them, whoever comes to me and does not hate father and mother, wife and children, brothers and sisters, yes, and even life itself, cannot be my disciple. Whoever does not carry the cross and follow me cannot be my disciple. For which of you, intending to build a tower, does not first sit down and estimate the cost to see whether he has enough to complete it? Otherwise, when he has laid the foundation and not able to finish it, all who see will begin to ridicule him, saying, this fellow began to build and was not able to finish. Or, what king, going out to wage war against another king, will not sit down first and consider whether he is able with 10,000 to oppose the one who comes against him with 20,000? If he cannot, then while the other is still afar away, he sends a delegation and asks for terms of peace. So therefore, none of you can become my disciple if you do not give up all your possessions. Now, obviously, the things that Jesus said there are mind-boggling. And if we look at that through the lens of his day, we might better understand. But the truth is, the things that Jesus said then are applicable to us now. How do we live out these things? How do we do what he requires here? How does and why does his words matter? Well, let's delve into this. Let's deal with the first thing that's mind-boggling here. Whoever comes to me and does not hate father and mother, wife and children, brothers and sisters, yes, and even his life itself, cannot be my disciple. Discipleship is fundamentally a call to allegiance. Jesus is to have first place over all, and that includes family. Nothing else is to be first. The call to hate is not literal, but rhetorical. Otherwise, Jesus' command to love one neighbor as oneself as a summation of what God desires makes no sense at all. The call to hate simply means to love less. And there are some scriptures there you can kind of look at, kind of reference to those scriptures there. The word hate in the Greek is transliterated as to love less. In other words, Jesus should be placed as a high priority in your life above others. Therefore, his words should also be at a high priority, because Jesus cannot be at a high priority if you're a Christ follower if his words don't matter. If his words are not first place as how you decide how to live, as how you decide how to treat others, as how you decide to matriculate wherever you are, whatever system, whatever kingdom, whatever democracy, or whatever the situation might be, the words of Jesus really do matter. And it's from those words that we get a better understanding as to what he was requiring of us, so that we can be an example of what he was saying. My concern and my fear is that we have received a watered down gospel, and our idea of the blessing, of the blessings and benefits that come along with following Christ is summed up into material gain, and is summed up into other things that people seem to enjoy. the blessedness state of peace in life and prosperity. And I'm not saying that following Christ, obeying God and doing those things, that we do not get that secondary benefit. But the truth is, the discipleship that Jesus is talking about, and when we look at it and we look at what we're being taught today, is diametrically opposed to what Jesus said. It's diametrically opposed to what mattered to Jesus then. Now, we just don't see eye to eye with what Jesus taught his disciples. Again, we in our society, we have a watered down version of what it really means to be a Christian. Discipleship is fundamentally a call to allegiance. The call to hate simply means to love less. We have to place the words of Jesus at a high priority in our life and inform how we practice it and how we live it out day to day. However, an important insight is worth our attention about the first century setting. Now, I think this is what's going to really open our eyes. It's going to really give us a better understanding what they were faced with when they decided to follow Jesus. Understanding Jesus' call to discipleship through this lens helps us to better understand what he was requiring of them. And until we grasp this first, we cannot make the connection today. At that time, a Jewish person who made a choice for Jesus would alienate his or her family. If someone desired acceptance by family more than a relationship with God, one might never come to Jesus, given the rejection that would inevitably follow. In other words, there was a certain familial persecution that occurred to anyone in a person's family that would depart it and they would follow Jesus. Also, we can say that it was not a very popular thing to serve Jesus or to be a follower of Jesus in that particular time. In other words, there could be no casual devotion to Jesus in the first century. A decision for Christ marked a person and automatically came with a cost. So Jesus is making it very clear that if you're going to follow me, there's a price you got to pay. That's a lot different than what we're hearing today, where if you follow Jesus, you're going to be blessed beyond measure. You're going to have a life that is so great and above all. In fact, you're not even going to have the problems that you had before. That is not the truth. There will be problems and there will be challenges, but following Christ does come with a cost. Let's understand the cost that they were faced with, and better, maybe we can better interpret how that cost is applied to our lives today. Now, I know what I'm teaching here is maybe not very popular, maybe not very hair-raising, but the truth is we need to readjust our understanding of what it means to be a Christ follower by first understanding the context by which his words were shared then we can better understand is how to translate those words into a lifestyle today. The modern Western phenomenon where a decision for Christ is popular in the larger social community was not true of Jesus' setting. Let me say that one more time. The modern Western phenomenon where a decision for Christ is popular. Let me tell you, we find that being a Christian is very popular. You find celebrities that say they've accepted Christ. It's very popular. We find politicians that have said they've accepted Christ. It's very popular in the larger social community. But back then, at that time, in the first century setting where Jesus and his disciples grew up, it was not popular. It was not true. And because we have difficulty with understanding that, it complicates our understanding of the significance of a decision to associate with Christ. We don't understand that, therefore it's complicated. We don't understand that, so we dismiss that which, we really don't understand, and we only gravitate toward those passages and those words and those teachings that make us what? Feel good. We have got to get away from feel-good Christianity. And that's kind of what we've been doled out here, especially here in America. We have received a gospel that makes people feel good, not necessarily giving out this type of understanding that there's a cost associated with following Christ. Today, one might associate with Christ simply because it's culturally appropriate rather than for spiritual reasons. Remember when Jesus had a group of people following him and they were just following him for the loaves? They weren't really concerned about, about the message of salvation. They weren't really concerned about, gravitating toward right standing with God as a people. They were only concerned about what can benefit them now, what can feed their belly. They were following for the loaves. They were following Christ for the wrong reasons. They were simply identifying with Christ for cultural appropriateness. And that it's culturally appropriate here in America to what? Be a Christian. But it's not culturally appropriate in other systems and in other nations where Christianity or the message of Christ is not elevated. It's not culturally appropriate there. In fact, it comes with a cost. In fact, it comes with a price. Such a decision was impossible in the first century, that is, to follow Christ for cultural appropriateness. If one chose to be associated with Jesus, one received what? A negative reaction, often from within a person's own home or own family group. So that's about the family aspect in this particular setting, in this particular passage of scripture. Let's talk about the cross. He goes on to say in Luke 14:27, whoever does not carry the cross and follow me cannot be my disciple. Carrying his cross to the heart of the city was supposed to be a tacit admission that the Roman Empire was correct in the sentence of death imposed upon him. An admission that Rome was right, and guess what? And Jesus was wrong. So when Jesus enjoined his followers to carry their crosses and follow him, he was referring to a public display before others that Jesus was right and that the disciples were following him even to their deaths. Now that's a tall order. That's something huge to think about. In essence, Jesus compelled his disciples to flip the script, renew the meaning of cross-bearing as an announcement that Jesus was right and the true king has finally arrived. We're called to do the same today. In their day and time, Rome, the Roman Empire and its emperor at that time, they were right. And therefore, Christ was wrong. And so by them carrying and making the choice to carry their own cross, it was a statement to say, Jesus, the true king, is right. And you're wrong. So as we interpret that today, when we live a life that Christ ascribes, when we value his words and incarnate them in our lives, we're saying by that type of cross bearing, we're saying by that cost that we're willing to pay, that Jesus was right and that he is the true king of the kingdom that is to come, in part now and in fullness later. Well, let's look at 28 through 33. Because here we have the story about consideration of that which we need to estimate. He says, for which of you, intending to build a tower, does not first sit down and estimate the cost to see whether he has enough to complete it? Otherwise, when he's laid the foundation and not able to finish, all who will see it will begin to ridicule him, saying, this fellow began to build and was not able to finish. Or, what king going out to war against another king will not sit down first and what? Consider whether he is able with 10,000 to oppose the one who comes against him with 20,000. If he cannot, while the others still are far away, he sends a delegation and asks for terms of peace. And lastly, he says, so therefore, none of you can become my disciple if you do not give up all your possessions. Estimate the cost, consider whether you're able, give up all your possessions. All of these statements that Jesus made here is mind-boggling. How can I, as a Christ follower, do these things he's requiring? And simply put, when we don't understand what Jesus is really requiring, either we make it mean something else, or we don't even agree to it, or we don't even ascribe to it at all. We just gravitate toward that which makes me feel good, so that the version of Christianity that I've come to adopt, that I've come to learn in my context, makes me feel good. We have to get past just feeling good because we are following Christ. We have to get to the point to where we realize that not only is he good, but his words are good, and his words are guides for how we are to treat others and how we are to be in this present life. Let's go on as we begin to wrap this up today. Jesus then taught that discipleship must include planning and sacrifice. Jesus taught that discipleship must include planning and sacrifice. Jesus draws attention to a simple observation. A prudent person would not begin a project until being sure it can be finished. A man would not lay the foundation for a tower unless he was sure he could finish it. And a king would not go to war unless he had enough soldiers to resist the opposing force. This principle of sacrifice is also important in the realm of discipleship. One must be willing to give up everything for Jesus. The people who were following Jesus throughout the countryside of Israel, they had done just that. 1433, a comment there says, if you seek to follow Jesus, then understand first that what is required is all you have. Applying this principle in the area of one's material possessions, as Luke often does, verse 33 concludes with a return to the refrain found in 26 and 27, quote unquote, none of you can become my disciple if you do not give up your possessions. The verb translated renounce or give up, apotasomai, literally means to say farewell to or to take leave of. Finally, another way of looking at the words of Jesus here is that a true disciple must be willing to give up what possesses them. Not just what you possess, but what's possessing you. True disciples target what's standing in the way of following him fully and then eliminating him. Now, I know that this has been mind-boggling. I know this has been one of those teachings that really has us, wow, I didn't really know that. And it's far better to not have known these things, that whereby I can take the words of Jesus and prayerfully say, Lord, how do I give up my possessions? How do I, hate father and mother? How do I count the cost? All of these are relevant questions, and they are supposed to be mind-boggling. But when we look at them in the context of what the early church and what Jesus and his disciples faced, we see that they lived under the threat of life and limb. The Roman Empire wasn't playing. And anybody that came opposing Rome or gave this idea of a threat to Rome, crucifixion was on the way. They were considered a traitor, and that crucifixion was the thing that they were looking for. They were going to wind up on a cross. When Jesus said to us then that if you don't take up your cross and follow me, you can't be my disciple, he is saying simply to us, wherever we are right now, the message of Christ is what matters. The words of Jesus is what matters. And my life matters to the point to where I'm willing to take the risk to walk in his words, irregardless of the challenges and the influences that may come my way. Now, do we all take on this whole thing all at once? How do we grapple with all these truths? How do we grapple with these mind-boggling statements that Jesus made? The old saying is, how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. And so by carefully, and you're going to hear me say this probably over and over again, by carefully looking at the context of how the words of Jesus were shared at that time. First of all, understand what it meant then. Prayerfully and through study, we can begin to look at how we can apply the essence of what Jesus was saying now. We may not be headed for crucifixion, not in that sense, but we might be headed toward a challenge that may say, either I'm going to obey the spirit of this age or I'm going to obey the Spirit of Christ. I trust that now and at this time that you've been blessed by what we've learned thus far on the words of Jesus matter. Come back next time as we right here, and we're going to go a little bit further in looking at what Jesus said, looking at some of the hard sayings that Jesus passed on to his disciples, and looking at some things that give us a fresh look at what it means to be a Christ follower in our world today. See you next time here on Talking Points.